Good afternoon. Welcome to the Center for E-Learning's professional development session for today. We have a fascinating topic for today and two dynamite presenters. So it is my pleasure to share with you today Enid Conley and Mary Rotundo. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mary Rotundo, and we have before Dr. Enid Conley. And welcome to today's session on self-directed learning and courses from the Center for E-Learning. So today's session is hosted through our conferencing tool WebEx. And we're using the meeting center, which is the one that allows small groups to interact like we're doing today. There's other options like the event center, which is used for large groups, the training center for the whole class, and my WebEx, which is the one-on-one option for when you're meeting with your students in one-on-one sessions. When you're having classes through the Canvas site, the meeting center is the one you will be using, and it's really similar to what you will be seeing today in the interactions that will be taking place. So I'm going to introduce our moderator for today. She will be communicating with you through the chat, and she will be asking and answering questions. Then we have ourselves, your presenters for today. We're going to be sharing our presentation, and more than anything, eliciting your participation and your responses. These are sessions that are meant to be really interactive, so we do invite you to participate with us, and to do that you can communicate with any of your hosts or with Ashley, the moderator, and we will unmute you. You can also use the hand icon to have your microphone unmuted.
Good afternoon, everyone, from snowy Reno, Nevada. I'm remote talking to you guys from the other side of the country. It's 9:18 for me, different time zone. I'm going to start with our objectives for professional development today. One of the things we want to do is to be able to describe how those course components support self-directed learning skills for your students, how our course templates and components align with quality matters standards, and we'll discuss that a little more later on in our presentation, or QM, and how to recognize the relationship between self-directed learning, quality matters, and our courses and supporting documents and templates, because they were all designed to be congruent and interact with each other. Now, things to think about, and that's going to be Mary who's going to discuss that with, both of us are going to discuss it with you. What are your current thoughts and ideas about self-directed learning? Can it happen in your courses? And of course, is it possible for you to build all of this into your courses? Keep this in mind, and as we go along, jot any questions or thoughts, and we can discuss this as we're going along. To be a little more concise, because self-directed learning has hundreds and hundreds of meetings, and every time I look at a new definition, it's added on. So just for our purposes today, we're going to be working with wonderful Roger Heemstrom's 1994 relevant seminal works, and he broke it down into 7 different types of definitions, and pretty much you'll see how they align with what we do. How to empower your students, exist in all learning and learning situations. And remember that learning is not necessarily in isolation. A lot of people confuse self-directed learning with being isolated. It has nothing to do with that. How the transfer of learning occurs, your variety of activities and resources, an effective supportive instructor, or in whatever case you are a facilitator, and the involvement of that person, and of course, innovative institutional support.
So Enid, as you were reading these, I was already thinking about those questions we started with. Transfer of learning, um, learning that doesn't happen in isolation and that can be applied to real life situations, active learning. All of that sounds like something we already do and something that is already built into our courses. So definitely something our faculty and our faculty are doing already. The only thing that we're going to do is probably discuss in a little bit more detail the idea of supporting these self-directed learning skills a little bit more by recognizing how the CeL artifacts that we use in our practice, in our course design, actually do those things already. So how might an online course support these concepts? So let's stop for a minute and think about what documents, what strategies do you think you already recognize as something that supports transfer of learning, learning that doesn't happen in isolation, and things like that?
I have a comment.
Mhm.
It seems to me that when we incorporate real life experiences into our assignments and our activities, that would be one component of supporting transfer of learning for sure, because they would see that it's happening and how it happens in the
Yes.
real world.
Mhm. Definitely. And when Enid and I were talking this morning, she said, let's make sure to mention the language courses because nothing really says more real life to me than using a language to actually communicate outside of the classroom. And we tend to think that languages cannot be taught online, but it is beautiful to see how in our courses here, our faculty have integrated beautiful opportunities and multiple opportunities for interaction and communication. So that's one example. Someone else would like to participate?
I would like to add something. If you look at self-directed learning as a continuum of the characteristics that everybody has, and we all go through that, you go from pedagogy, where you're very dependent on someone else, to andragogy, where you're pretty much independent, not isolated from a lot of things. You can see that design in our online courses, where if someone may need a little more help, they're here, you can hold their hand, to someone that's very self-directed, is very clearly understands the concepts inside your course, and they can move through it a little quicker. So those are things you can think about when you're looking at your courses. And remember that all these courses are fluid. You're going to be able to add your own stuff while we keep the same framework so that we can keep all of these quality assurances within our courses.
It's that constant reflecting, thinking about what we have done and what works, and then adding pieces to it to move them forward, it would seem to me.
And we'll see later on how that actually happens through self-directed learning in our students, how we provide those opportunities for self-reflection. So we'll talk about that later. So now we're going to just take a look very briefly at the theory.
If we look at our course templates and documents, everything that's in there was intentionally designed. What do we mean by intentional? We use quality matters standards. We take all of their standards and look at them, look at our course template, look at all our template documents, that is your syllabus and your blueprint, and some of the stuff that are already in there. And they're all designed with quality assurance in mind. How does that work? Well, if we have our QM, these are pretty good guides for students to be successful in their self-directed learning, because all the skills are put into the online environment and they can just take it from there. It also allows our instructors to add materials, like I said earlier, add your assessments, videos, and tools, and so on, everything that you need, because you're the subject matter expert, to put forward the learning. And of course, the positive online experience. How do we support this? Well, a good climate is to teaching and learning. One of them is good discussions, introductions, building that community within your course room. And then finally, very important, is allowing accessibility and usability for everybody. And we will be sending these templates, listen to me, the PowerPoints is accessible as well for those of you who want. Just let us know. We will send it to you so you could see it in accessible form. Now, if we look at the QM general standards, and you look back at what self-directed learning is defined as 1 through 7, you'll see that our course overview and introduction aligns with that. Our self-directed learning objectives, I'm here stuck with self-directed, your competencies align with the definition, as well as your assessments, your instructional materials, learning activities, course technology, learner support, and accessibility and usability. Why does all this align with SDL? Because that's how we develop a very self-directed course.
Yeah, and all of these are embedded into our Canvas template. Our course design process takes into account every single one of these standards and principles.
Now, kind of an overview, if we look at self-directed learning and quality matters, that's how we get our CEL course and document templates. Now, this is a point where we'd like for you guys to ask questions, add to the conversation, because I'm sure that most, not just our designers, but our instructors are curious on how this has been developed.
Alrighty, so here we're going to provide a couple examples of the first, one of the principles that informs the course design and the creation of our template, which Enid already talked about, which is also one of the pillars of quality matters, is that principle of alignment. Everything is thought out ahead of time, so there is a connection between these essential course components, but more than that, there's also communicating those to the students, letting students know why these things and how these things are connected and how they impact their learning, so they can make decisions and they can be proactive and they can guide how and when they do things that will contribute to their learning experiences. So the major tool we use for that, to communicate that and make that transparent to our students, is our blueprint. And we have an example here of what we call it, this is a technical term and we apologize for that. It's our alignment notation, but basically what this does is show that relationship. So for the example today, I'm going to just real quickly go over how these things connect back to each other. So we have here course level objectives, and we have number 1 right here. And then we have, within the module, we have these 2 module level objectives. And we have this notation here that says that my module objective 1 relates back to my course objective number 1. There are multiple instances through the course where our students are made aware of this connection. So not only does it happen in the blueprint, but it happens throughout the course. And the rationale for this is letting our students know why these things contribute to their learning process. And then the same happens for the assessments, right? So we have an example here of a discussion, and the notation, the numbering system here is telling students that these assessments relates to objective number 1 in module 1. So this activity is allowing them to work towards completing completing this objective here. So I would like to stop here and ask if you have anything to say, any comments, any questions about this thing that I want to share. And I'm going to go into an actual Canvas course and the Start Here module. The Start Here module is another feature that really sets the stage for self-directed learning, because from the start, from point zero, students know and they are taught where to go for information. Anything that needs to be discussed or made clear will be here on this Start Here module. Again, referring back to the course objectives, the blueprint, there is a link to that blueprint I was telling you about, the syllabus, and every piece of relevant policy and university related information that our students need to know is here in the Start Here module. One more thing that I really like is this beautiful to-do list. I work full-time and I have 2 children and I run a house like many of us, right? We wear different hats. So as a student, I really need to be strategic about how I manage my time. Having this to-do list at the very beginning of each module, and I will show you another one for this here that is a 2-week module, you'll see that the list is a little bit longer. So if I know I have a 2-week period to complete these assignments, then I can plan my time ahead of time. I apologize.
And I noticed that you've got the notations there again on that
Yes.
page, relating it
Yes.
back to the
Yes.
course level objectives.
Yes, here. So again, we make these transparent, evident, and many times through the course, we let students know the reason why these things are there. So I'm going to go back to our presentation. And I'm going to show you another way when this notation appears. Individual assignments also have this language here that reminds the student why, one more time, they're doing and they're engaging in a specific activity. So that's another reason, another way in which we are letting students self-direct and guide their own learning.
And as Mary's been saying, as long as the student sees the congruency where everything connects, it actually helps them in their learning.
Because they know why. That knowing the why really makes the difference. Okay, so here we would like to take a minute or two to hear from you. So let's jot down on your notes or in the chat or raise your hands to have your microphones unmuted. Let us know how you share that why with your students, how you make it transparent to your students, the reason why you have the assignments you have, or you have the activities you have, and even the content you have. How do you make that known to your students?
I was trying to write in the chat
Okay.
and got messed up on it. But I also include, I have a conversation with them about the why, but I also include multiple times during any given class, online or face-to-face, about to stop, just the way you're doing, the retrieval practice. Stop and think about what we just talked about, write it down, and I usually ask them to incorporate a drawing of some sort with a little bit of text for that dual coding to cause it, which is what causes it to go into long-term memory. So I have them think about what we just talked about or discussed or however, and then jot down their ideas about it.
Absolutely.
Now let's look at our quality matters standards and principles and how this all combines. Why is interaction and engagement opportunities important? Why is that important in your classroom? You have to ask yourself. So if we implement that into our classroom, implement well-defined requirements for each student, that is, clear course and institutional policies, rubrics, and directions for each assignment. And finally, a clear plan in your syllabus of how you, the instructor, are going to interact with our students. How do you think that supports self-directed learning?
Oh, if I'm a student, I remember I had a semester where when I didn't hear from my instructor all the way towards the end, and
Ouch.
it felt very, very unnerving, not knowing how I was doing. But if I know exactly when my instructor is supposed to get back to me with feedback, and I know exactly that I will be getting that feedback in time for me to improve or change or do whatever needs to be done, that will make me feel empowered. I will know from the beginning that my instructor is there to work with me, and I will not have to wait until the very end when the grade feels like, oh, this is definite. I would like to know that I can work towards the grade I want, and that I have stuff that I can do as the semester unfolds.
Absolutely. That guidance is very important.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we try to emphasize with the faculty that we work with is that a key component for student success, of course, is their engagement.
Yes.
And a key component to their engagement has to do with the teacher presence within the course. So if they are interacting with the students, with the discussion, with their videos, with whatever, then the students are comfortable knowing that there truly is someone who
Yes.
cares.
Yes. And also the idea of using the rubric to inform the student before they do the assessment. If I have the rubric and that is available, and I know before I even start working on an assignment, I know what my professor wants and how he has broken down the skills, the knowledge. That really helps, because then I can work towards what I want, but I can always know what my professor wants. So that really helps designing my own path towards completing an assignment.
And another good thing to back up on what Mary is saying on the rubric is having examples. There is a big movement now of putting examples in your course room.
Yes.
What does a good paper look like? What does a good written discussion look like? And those of us that teach online, many of us in here included, you have seen discussions that are just not academic, that are just not up to par, but maybe the student just doesn't understand how to write a written academic discussion, because a lot of them are doing it on their phones, on personal and fun websites that have nothing to do with in a course room where you have to answer a prompt or go with a question, and then you have to show your references, whatever APA, MLA format. So it's always a good idea to have one for a discussion, have a good example, a written paper, or any other assignment that you think it's important.
Yes. And now going back to my experience as an instructor, when I was teaching languages, which I did for a very, very long time, I wanted my students, I would not correct my students' mistakes. We devised a method in which I would tell them the kind of mistake it was. So if, let's say, they used the verb, but the tense was incorrect, or they use an adjective when they should have used a noun, I would indicate the type of mistake. So I would give them the opportunity to work on those mistakes and try to solve and self-correct. And always they had the opportunity to resubmit. So anything that they wrote, they knew it was work in progress that always had a chance to get better and improve on what they did, but always knowing how they were doing. And we get back, this takes us back to the idea of timely, well-informed feedback, teacher presence.
Absolutely.
Multiple ways to be present in your courses, right?
Yep.
And that takes us to our next principle, which is moving your students towards self-reflection, evaluating where they are at the beginning, where they are midway, where they are towards the end, where they are within a given piece of content by giving them prompting questions and or statements that require introspection. And this is a way, of course, to engage in active learning, learning that takes things like metacognition into account. So always having an opportunity for your students to self-assess their progress. So what is my comfort level when it comes to something like speaking in a language class? How confident am I as I start making progress towards that skill? Recognizing my strengths and my weaknesses. That is something that I think is mind opening, right? Because then I can use my strengths to fortify or strengthen what other issues or points I have that are not as strong, right? Using visual organizers, right? Like they want to know what have learned charts, right? These here, KWL charts. Using retrieval practices like we've been doing, having your students stop throughout a learning session or a learning event and jotting down anything that comes to mind about what has been happening. And then I had a conversation with a faculty member the other day, and she said, I know what the choke points are in my class. I know exactly when my students are going to be crying for help, and I will be proactive. So she schedules synchronous meetings with her students exactly at the points where she knows they will most need her. So, and that will take us to our next slide. So, and we would like to stop again and give you guys the opportunity to think and share about these ideas, right? For allowing your students to reflect, and whether you use checkpoints or choke points. So the question here is, how do you scaffold your interactions or your feedback as your students approach those choke points throughout your course? So again, your input is highly appreciated. So we're going to give you a couple of minutes to think and then share.
Think about the coolers that you have, the course room coolers, where it's a place where everyone can talk about points and learn from each other. How do you use them? Do you plan to use them? Because that's a great checkpoint.
Mm-hmm. And before we talk, think about these checkpoints are not necessarily content oriented, but opening an opportunity for your students to tell you where they are, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I have students who have to do field experience. And so they need someplace where they can think about what happened when they were in class observing this week and to jot some things down, and maybe even in that stopping by the water cooler conversation area to interact and think about, share some of the things that happened that may or may not have had anything to do with what was going on.
Yeah.
Lynette says, well, I like self-assessments a lot. They always lead me to questions.
And maybe questions that your professor did not anticipate. It's like a discussion board that sometimes goes in unpredicted directions or places you did not think it would go, and the value of when that happens, when your students take a point or a topic into their own hands and make it their own, right?
Absolutely. When you have relevant direction that goes and you bring out new thought and a synthesis and a different perspective, that's fantastic.
Yep. All right, so we're going to move on to our next slide.
And then some final thoughts for all of you. I love this, was in one of Kreber's research that she did, that the ability to think critically and willingness and capacity to engage in self-directed learning are considered very important prerequisites for lifelong education. So remember, when you're working with our courses, all of our course components and supporting documents are developed to help you enhance in your course room the self-directed learning skills of our students. All of our designs have been developed around the QM, total quality assurance in your courses, and including our documents and templates that allows you again to add your own rich and engaging student-centered components to the course. And I hope you guys have questions about that, because I know you get to see the course room when you go in. You get to see the syllabus and some of the other documents that are there for you. All you have to do is fill them in. Does it make sense how all of this comes together? Quality assurance as well as self-directed learning. No thoughts?
Alrighty, so let's talk about what's coming up. Next week, we have our library superstars. They're going to be having a session on literature reviews. And then we have our spring break.
Yes. And I think our presenters next week, Laurie Rebar is always with us, but I think Christy Padron is also going to be offering information about literature review. Who knew that they would help us with a lit review? I'm all about that.
Well, if any of you have any questions, please feel free to email Mary or myself or both of us so we can both collaborate with you. And we'd be more than happy to answer any questions you have. If you can't think of it now, you can think of it later.
And we'll be sending out this reference list as well as other information later on this afternoon too.
And thank you, Judy, and our wonderful host in our course room. I think it's Ashley and Daniel, or is just Ashley today?
Just Ashley.
Okay, thank you so much. And for all of you that attended, thank you for coming.
Thank you, and see you next week.